Torah says in Shmot Perek Chaf Aleph, which is referenced in source number 1. You can open up in the Tanakh. Shmot Chaf Aleph, Pasuk Chaf Dalid. Maybe we'll start even a pasuk before that, pasuk Chaf Gimel. Ve'im ason yeh, we'll disregard the context for now. V'natata nefesh tachat nefesh. The punishment for murder is mitat beidin, right? The murderer is himself put to death. And then continuing from that, in the same context of nefesh tachat nefesh, we read ayin tachat ayin, shein tachat shein, yad tachat yad, regel tachat ragel, kviya tachat kviya, petza tachat patza, chabura tachat chabura. Right, we have here many examples of different kinds of bodily harm that one person can do to another, and in all of them the Torah seems to mandate unequivocally that the punishment is ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and so on. Right? Measure for measure. Similarly, as referenced in source number 2, Vayikra Perek Chaf Dalid. There perhaps even more categorically, the first cases in Sefer Shemot were by example, right? Shein, ayin, and so on. In Vayikra Perek Chaf Dalid, Pasuk Yud Tet, V'ish ki ten mum ba'amito, right? Any kind of mum. Kasher asa ken ye'aseh lo. As he did, so shall be done to him. And then we have the examples just like in Parshas Mishpatim, shever tachat shever, ayin tachat ayin, shein tachat shein. And then once again, returning to the categorical statement, Kasher yiten mum ba'adam, ken yinaten bo. Okay, and this seems very clear. The punishment for bodily injury is the same kind of injury, an eye for an eye, and so on. On the other hand, as we all know, raise this a little bit. As we all know, the halacha is not so. Take a look at source number 3. We have the Mishnah in Bava Kama. Hachovel b'chavero chayav alav mishum chamisha dvarim. A person who injures another is chayav to pay money. 5 different types of payment. The first being nezek. B'nezek, b'tzar, b'ripui, b'shevet, u'voshet. B'nezek ketzad. What is the first of the 5? Nezek. Simet, eino kata et yado shiveret raglo. Ro'in oto ki'ilu hu eved nimkar bashuk. V'shamin kama haya yafe v'kama hu yafe. The first type of payment, called nezek, relates to depreciation in monetary value of the person's physical body, as estimated in a slave market. And this, of course, relates only to cases where there is permanent, lasting damage. Right? Any kind of wound which is not permanent, which is not lasting, there will not be any chiyuv nezek. Okay. The second payment, tza'ar. How do you estimate tza'ar? Kva'o b'shipud o b'masmer v'afil al tziporno b'makom she'ino oseh chavura omdim kama adam kayotze b'ze rotze litol liot mitzta'er kach. Right? This is a payment for the physical pain that was caused and is estimated by the amount of money a person would be willing to receive in order to undergo that pain. Okay, and then we have ripui, pay the person's medical bills. I'm skipping a little bit. Then we have shevet, the cost of the person not being able to work for a time period while he's convalescing. And then finally, boshet, hakol lefi ha'mevayesh v'mitbayesh, right? The more of a social category, right? The shame or humiliation that was inflicted on the person as an aspect of the Kabbalah. So we see here very clearly that the halacha is that there is no ayin tachat ayin, there is no shein tachat shein. It is merely an issue. The only punishment that is meted out is a monetary punishment, a fine, different types of fines that are imposed. The 5 tashlumim, nezek, shevet, ripui, tza'ar, and bashet. And the question is, how do we resolve this apparent contradiction between the halacha on the one hand and the psukim on the other hand? And this is perhaps one of the most blatant and clear and most difficult examples of the whole category of cases where we have a lot of different places in the Torah where we have halachos that seem to contradict the psukim. And we'll see some of them further on. We're going to focus on this example of ayin tachat ayin, but also treat the more general problem. In addition to the 2 psukim that we read, one in Mishpatim and one in Parshas Emor, there's another pasuk that's really part of this exact same phenomenon, which is in Parshas Ki Teitzei. We have the pasuk v'katzota et kapa lo tachos einecha. Right, in a case where a woman attacks a man in his private parts, the halacha, the din that the Torah prescribes for that case is v'katzota et kapa. You cut off her hand. Okay, needless to say, once again, the halacha is not so. The halacha, we learn from that pasuk the chiyuv of boshet, right? The fifth of the 5 payments that we mentioned before, boshet, is learned from that pasuk of the katzotai kapa lo tachos einecha. We do not actually cut off any hands. The Rambam, in his introduction to the Mishnah, where he's talking about a categorization of the different parts of Torah Shebe'al Peh in general, he talks about 2 different kinds of categories. He says there are some parts of Torah Shebe'al Peh which Chazal were able to derive on their own, based on principles that were given to them from Moshe, from Sinai, but using those principles they derived halachos on their own. Some halachos are like that. Other halachos, says the Rambam, are not like that. Other halachos, the halachos themselves were given mi Sinai. And the Rambam gives a few examples. And the example that, according to the Rambam, is the clearest example of such a case is exactly this halacha of ayin tachat ayin. Why does the Rambam consider this the clearest example? Because in the Gemara, which maybe we'll read the beginning of in a moment, the Gemara brings something like at least 10 different sources of how you could learn the halacha that ayin tachat ayin is really tashlumin, that it's really payment from the psukim. Maybe we'll read the beginning of that Gemara, just to get a taste of it. Looking at the Gemara right after the Mishnah that we just read, in the second half of source number 3, the Gemara asks, Amai, why? Ayin tachat ayin amar Rachman. The Torah says ayin tachat ayin. Why are we paying money? Ema ayin mamash. We should say that it means literally an ayin. Answers the Gemara, lo salka da'atach. No, don't even consider that. The Tanya, we have a brisa that says as follows, Yachol simeh et eino mesameh et eino, katay et yado mekatay et yado, shiber et raglo meshaber et raglo. Might you think that we actually do ayin tachat ayin, mamash, physical punishment? No, Talmud Lomar, we learn from a different pasuk. It's the continuation of the psukim that we read in Parshas Emor, in Sefer Vayikra. Makeh adam u'makeh behema. The Torah mentions 2 cases. Makeh adam v'natatad nefesh tachat nafesh. The punishment for murder is mitas beis din. And makeh behema yeshal mena. Right? If a person who kills an animal only has to pay for it. And we learn a hekesh, a comparison between the 2. Ma makeh behema letashlumin, af makeh adam letashlumin. And of course here it's being learned not for killing a person, but for causing him lesser bodily injury. So that is one source that the Brisa here learns for the fact that the punishment is actually tashlumin and not ayin mamash. Continues the Brisa, v'im nafshecha lomar, alternatively you can say a different way of learning it, harehu omer lo tikchu kofer lenefesh rotzeach, right, a pasuk that we actually just read, right, you cannot take a kofer, not sure exactly how to translate kofer, right, a ransom or a, anybody want to suggest a translation for the word kofer? No. Okay, you can't take payment instead of a murderer being punished. And we've caught a murderer and he's punishable by death. Let's say the murderer says, I want to pay instead of being put to death. No, you cannot accept that. Lo tikhu kofer lenefesh rotzach, asher hu rasha lamut. לנפש רוצח אתה לוקח כופר, אבל אתה לוקח כופר לראשי איברים שאין חוזרים. Right, so the Brisa learns from the fact that the Torah specified specifically for רוצח you cannot take kofar, that you can take kofar for other cases of lesser bodily injury, right? The ראשי איברים שאינם חוזרים, even permanent bodily injury, and therefore that kofar is the payment that we're talking about here, the payment of the chamisha dvarim in the Mishnah. These are 2 different ways that we find here in the Gemara for learning from Psukim the fact that ayin tachat ayin is actually tashlumin. The Gemara continues for the next amud or more, maybe even close to a daf. There are at least 10 different limudim, completely different limudim, of how we know that it means tashlumin rather than ayin tachat ayin mamash. Says the Rambam, despite the fact that we have all these different ways of learning, which would seem to imply that none of them are exactly terribly convincing or unequivocal, so you would expect, if Chazal are really just looking at the Psukim and trying to understand what the halacha is, you would expect there to be some sort of disagreement about the halacha itself. Nevertheless, we find across the board agreement to the din itself, that it is tashlumin. The din of the Mishnah is accepted. Says the Rambam, this is proof of the fact that the din itself, that we don't actually perform ayin tachat ayin, but rather it's tashlumin. That is something which is mikubal l'Moshe misinai, that is mipi hashmua, as the Rambam says in Mishnah Torah. And Chazal afterwards wanted to connect it to the Psukim, but the halacha itself is fundamental. The Rambam goes so far as to say that if a Navi were to come along and say that ayin tachat ayin should be done mamash, actually do ayin tachat ayin, this would be a nevi sheker, because he is being kofer in Torah shebe'al peh, and he would be put to death for stating that opinion. Or not opinion, but as a nevuah, if he said it as a navi. The Rambam Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Chovel also repeats that this is a halacha which is mipi hashmua, and every Beis Din from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu onwards was doing it. A very clear case of a halacha, a fundamental halacha of a Torah shebe'al peh, which only strengthens the question of how do we deal with this contradiction between Torah shebichtav and Torah shebe'al peh. Going once again to the general question of contradictions in general between Torah shebichtav and Torah shebe'al peh, not specifically ayin tachat ayin. There are various approaches to this question amongst the Rishonim. I'm going to show amongst the Rishonim two perhaps extreme opinions represented by Ibn Ezra and by Rashbam respectively, and afterwards I'm going to try to suggest an in-between approach in between those two extreme opinions. Starting with Ibn Ezra, let's take a look at source number 4. This is Ibn Ezra at the end of his introduction to the Torah. The context, the immediate context, is Ibn Ezra talking about Midrashei Chazal, not in the context of halacha, but in the context of the narratives in the Torah. Right? We have it within the context of a story. We have a midrash that says something which would seem to be different than the pshat of the pasuk. So Ibn Ezra says, "Ba'avur hadrash hapshat einena sama kishivim panim laTorah." Right? So it's nice that there's a midrash, there's a chazal, but says Ibn Ezra, I in my perush, I'm going to give different perushim. I'm going to go only based on pshat, even when it's against chazal. That's when we're talking about the narrative sections of the Torah, things that are not about halacha. Rak b'torot u'v'mishpatim u'v'chukim, but when it comes to halacha, when it comes to laws, im matzanu shnei tamim lapsukim v'atayim ha'echad k'divrei hama'atikim, meaning chazal, right? If the pasuk can be interpreted in more than one way, and only one fits in with the way chazal understood the pasuk, shayu kulam tzadikim, nisha'en al amitam bli safek b'yadayim chazakim. Then we will rely completely on them. V'chalila chalila militarev im hatzdukim, chas v'shalom, that we should be like the tzdukim, ha'omrim ki ha'atakatam makcheshet ha'katuv. Chas v'shalom, we should be like the tzdukim who say that the Masorah of Chazal contradicts the Torah. V'dikdukim. Rak kadmoneinu hayu emet, v'chol divrehem emet, v'Hashem Elokim emet, yanche et avdo b'derech emet. Everything Chazal say in the context of halachos, of mitzvahs, it is all true, and we have to accept what they say and understand the psukim based on their interpretations. And Ibn Ezra, by and large, follows through in his parish with this mission statement. As an example, let's take source number 5. This is in a pasuk talking about Malkos. Okay, the pasuk talking about Malkos says, "Vayayim bin hakot harasha v'yipilo hashofet v'hikau lefanav kedei rishato b'mispar." The mitzvah in Malkos, v'hikau lefanav, to strike the person, to flog the person, kedei rishato b'mispar. What does it mean, kedei rishato b'mispar? Says Ibn Ezra, source number 5, kedei rishato b'mispar hamakot. היה נראה לנו שיש אבון שיוקע עליו 10, גם 20 או פחות ויותר, והעד כדי רישתו. It would seem, says Ibn Ezra, that כדי רישתו במספר means that we fit the number of malkos to the severity of the avera. Right? If it's a very severe avera, I'll get more malkos. Less severe, I'll get less malkos. It's all dependent on how severe it is. רק לא יוסיף על 40. Right? Immediately in the next pasuk says, 40 yakenu lo yosif. So what does that pasuk mean according to this perush? It means that that's a maximum. You do it kedei rishata, according to the Rishah, 40 yakenu lo yosif, but no more than 40 in any case. Continues Ibn Ezra and says, lulei divrei hakabbalah, meaning the Masoret of Chazal, v'hu levado ha'emet. All of this is what I would have said if not for the fact that the clear halacha is that any time a person is over on a lav, the punishment is always exactly 39 malkos. Right? Except in a case where medically there's some reason why the person won't be able to withstand it. But basically the punishment for being over on a lav is 39 malkos no matter what. So, says Ibn Ezra, so if Chazal say it, that's it. This would have been hypothetically interesting to say such a parish, but obviously it's wrong. Okay, and in many places Ibn Ezra does this. He basically accepts the halacha of Chazal in every place where it would otherwise apparently contradict the psukim. By the way, should mention, there are a few places where Ibn Ezra does say perushim which seem to contradict the halacha. Okay, for example, when the Torah says that you have to shech the korban pesach bein ha'arbaim, what does bein ha'arbaim mean? So according to Ibn Ezra, it means that you start towards evening and you continue into the night. The Pesach was actually shechted at night, according to Ibn Ezra. Right? L'halacha, we know that that's not so. Right? If it was shechted at night, it's pasul. Shechita is only during the day. Bein ha'arbaim is understood by Chazal to mean the afternoon. So, and there are a couple of other cases like this. So in all of these cases where Ibn Ezra says the perush against Chazal, interestingly enough, he doesn't even mention Chazal. And it has been suggested, the Tashbetz already points out in the Tshuva, the Tashbetz says, Ibn Ezra chacham gadol haya, velo baki badinim. Okay, meaning, he may have been an expert in Tanakh and in philosophy and in Dikduk, right? And he certainly knew, some aspects of Halach and Torah Sheba'al Peh. He does quote things, right? But he was not an expert. That was not his field of expertise. So in those cases where Ibn Ezra says a perush that does not fit in with halacha, it seems that it's simply because he did not know the halacha. I would add to that, without having really fully examined it properly, from a few places that I've noticed, it would seem possibly that Ibn Ezra knew the Mishnah but not the Gemara. Right? So this is, at this point, just a little bit of conjecture, but maybe he learned more Mishnayos than Gemara. You knew more of that, a possibility. Anyway, but in principle, the Ibn Ezra position is that there is no disparity, no possible gap between halacha and the Torah. If you think there's a difference between, or a contradiction between the halacha and the Torah, it's because you didn't understand something properly. Go back to the psukim, work some more at it, and eventually you'll understand how the halacha fits in with the Torah. That is the opinion of Ibn Ezra. On the other extreme, we have Rashbam. Okay? Some of you may have been at one or the other of Professor Lukshin's shiurim today. I know he discussed it twice in two different shiurim. Rashbam takes an opposite attitude, and let's read it inside. Source number 7. ידעו ויבינו יודעי שכל, כי לא באתי לפרש הלכות, אף על פי שהם עיקר. כי מעיטור המקראות נשמעין ההגדות וההלכות. ואני לפרש פשוטן של מקראות באתי. ואף על פי כן ההלכות עיקר, כמו שאמרו רבותינו, הלכה עוקרת מקרא. Okay, says Rashbam, my purpose in the parish is not to explain halacha. Despite the fact that they are ikar, whatever that means. In some sense, they are more important. But the halachot don't necessarily come from the pshat of the words and sentences. It's not part of the regular explication and speech and the communication of the Torah. It is mitul hamikot sometimes. Right, from the fact that there's an extra vav, an extra hey, all the midos shatrani dreshet bahem, that's where halachas come from sometimes. But beyond that, there's pshat. And these are two completely different levels. And my function in this parish, says Rashbam, is to talk about the pshat, and halacha is halacha, and these are two different levels which do not have any kind of clear relationship between them. Okay, and following this mission statement, Rashbam in fact interprets several psukim in several places in ways that are against the halacha. Okay, turning the page, look at source number 8. This is a famous one. And what's interesting about it is that it's not even a case where the pshat is so clearly and blatantly against the halacha. The Rashbam could easily have interpreted it to fit in with halacha. And he doesn't because he's not bothered at all by the fact that it's against the halacha. Says Rashbam in source number 8, Le'ot al yadcha. Right, this is on the pasuk of Hayu letotafot beininecha, v'hayu lot al yadcha letotafot beininecha, right, which is the source for the mitzvah of tefillin. Says Rashbam, lefi omek pshuto, yeh lecha lezikaron tamid, ki'ilu katuv al yadcha. Ke'ein, and he quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, simeni kachotam al libcha. Right, this is a metaphorical expression, says Rashbam. When the Torah says v'haya leot al yadcha letotafot beininecha, it means that these ideas of Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kabbalas Mitzvahs, they should be precious to you. You should keep them on your heart. But it's an expression. It doesn't actually mean tefillin, it says Rashbam. Okay, now this is, of course, quite astounding. Right? Even if, as has been suggested, even if Rashbam were to agree that the psukim in Sefer Dvarim do actually mean concrete tefillin, but he still would be missing the two parshios of Kadesh and Va'avaki V'yacha, where these psukim appear from the tefillin. You would end up with a tefillin of 2 parshios, not of 4. Right? Which clearly, 4 parshios are D'Oraisa L'Halacha. Right? So he's saying a perush, which he didn't really have to say. It's an interesting possible perush, but it's not like Ayin Tachat Ayin, where saying anything different, saying that it's Mammon is really very difficult. But here you could say it actually means tefillin. It wouldn't be difficult. But Rashbam is perfectly okay with saying a perush because it seems like it makes sense to him, and it's against halacha, and that's fine. And Rashbam does not feel the need to explain what the relationship between the pshat and the halacha is. He's not dealing with halacha, he's dealing with pshat. One more example from Rashbam, source number 9. Okay, and this is the case of Shomrim. Okay, in Shmot Perek Kaf Bet, there are 2 parshiot dealing with Shomrim, and the din in the 2 parshiot is different. The first parshiot, they're both parshiot, are talking about a case where a shomer, right, somebody has been given a deposit to guard, to take care of, and then it is stolen, right, Gneva. But the din in this case of Gneva is different in the 2 parshios. In the first parsha, the shomer is basically patur, that he's chayav shavua, but basically the shomer does not have to pay for the object that was stolen. Whereas in the second parsha, he is chayav in the case of Gneva. It was stolen from him and he was responsible, therefore he has to pay for it. What is the difference between the 2 cases? So la halacha, right, as anybody who knows, who's learned any dinei shomrim, bava metzia, shavuos, whatever, right, all over Shas, it's very clear that this is a difference between shomer chinam and shomer sachar. Right, shomer chinam is pater in a case of Gneva, and also Aveda. Gneva, Aveda, shomer chinam is pater. He has to take a shavua, but basically it's pater. As opposed to a shomer sachar, who is chayav in a case of Gneva v'Aveda. And then we have Shoel, who's chayav even be'onsin. That actually appears in the Pshat of the Psukim. Okay, however, these 2 parshios, the first which paters in case of Gneva, and the second which is mechayev in the case of Gneva, make no mention of shomer chinam versus shomer sachar. The difference in the cases that are described in the 2 parshios, the first parshia begins with ki ten ish el re'eu kesef o kelim, and the second parshia is ki ten ish el re'eu shol chamor oseh lishmor, an animal. And I might be slightly misquoting there, but it's talking about an animal. Says Rashbam, source number 9, ki ten ish el re'eu kesef o kelim v'gomer, בפרשה זו פוטר את השומר מגניבה ועבדה. בפרשה שנייה מחייבו בגניבה ועבדה. ופרשו רבותינו ראשונה בשומר חינם, שנייה בשומר שכר. ולפי פשוטו של מקרא, פרשה ראשונה שכתוב בה כי ייתן איש אל רעהו כסף או כלים לשמור, מטלטלין הם. ולשומרם בתוך ביתו כשאר חפציו נתנן לו. לפיכך, אם נגנבו בביתו פטור, כי שמרן כשמירת חפציו. Right, the case in which the shomer is pater from Gneva v'Aveda is a case of metaltalin. Why then should he be pater in the case of Gneva? Because the expectations from a shomer on metaltalin is to keep those metaltalin along with the rest of his own personal objects in his house. If a person left them in his house with the rest of his things, locked the door, and went away for a while, and then a ganav snuck in, broke the door or whatever, and came in and stole things, then the shomer has completely fulfilled the expectations from him. Since he fulfilled the expectations, he is pater. Continuing in Rashbam, אבל פרשה שנייה שכתוב בה כי ייתן איש אל רעהו חמור או שור או שא וכל בהמה לשמור, that's the exact quote I was looking for, ודרך בהמות לרעות בשדה, right, the normal way of taking care of animals is you don't just lock them up somewhere and leave them. You have to take care of them. Right, and the typical, in fact, in the Gemara, whenever the Gemara wants to talk about an example, actually let's leave that aside for a moment. Right, but in general, the way to take care of animals is you have to take them out to the field, right? And you have to watch them. You're a shepherd, basically, right? So the expectations are to be there, to be present. Right? Gneva v'Aveda are cases where something happens because you were not present. And if you were not present and something happened, you do not live up to your expectations. Right? דרך בהמות לרעות בשדה, ודאי כשהפקידם על מנת לשומרם מגנבים הפקידם לו. ולכן אם נגנבו חייב. So Rashbam here says the pshat is that the distinction between the 2 parshios is the difference between metaltalin versus animals. And he even gives an explanation why there should be this difference in the din between these two cases. In the halacha, it's shomer chinam versus shomer sachar. Rashbam doesn't care. Okay, there's absolutely no attempt to deal with the disparity between the two cases. What about ayin tachat ayin? Okay, so we talked about Ibn Ezra versus Rashbam in the general cases. How do they apply this? Apply their general opinions, their general methods to ayin tachat ayin. So Ibn Ezra, as expected, now we're going to go back to source number 6, which I skipped before. Get back to the first page. Source number 6. Ibn Ezra, in fact, follows through with his methodology. Says Ibn Ezra, Ayin Amar Rav Saadia, right, this is even before Ibn Ezra, Rav Saadia Gaon was working this way. Lo nuchal lefarish zeh pasuk kemashma'o. We can't interpret this kipshuta. Ki im adam hika ein avdo, v'sara shlishit or einav, ech yitachen shiyukam maka kazot b'li tosefet u'migrat. So first of all, says Rav Saadia Gaon, right, doing ayin tachat ayin is not a punishment that we can actually perform precisely, right, in order to get the exact same amount of injury as the person perpetrated. That would require great precision, which we're not capable of, so obviously that's not what it means. So basically the argument is that it doesn't make sense, we can't do it, and therefore that must not be what the pasuk meant. I'm going to skip to the second paragraph of source number 6. V'haklal, says Ibn Ezra, now it's Ibn Ezra himself. לא נוכל לפרש על דרך מצוות התורה פירוש שלם, אם לא נסמוך על דברי חז"ל. Bottom line, says Ibn Ezra, you can argue back and forth, but Chazal said what they said. כי כאשר קיבלנו התורה מן האבות, כן קיבלנו תורה שבעל פה, אין הפרש ביניהם. והנה יהיה פירוש עין תחת עין, ראוי להיותו אינו תחת אינו אם לא ייתן כופרו. So at the end, Ibn Ezra gives his own parish of how somehow to read the pasuk. Right? Obviously, I think it's obvious. Not very convincing on the pshat level, but Ibn Ezra is following through on his mission statement to accept the halachot of Chazal. What about Rashbam? What does Rashbam do with ayin tachat ayin? So we could expect Rashbam to interpret ayin tachat ayin kipshuta. However, I didn't bring this here on the sheet. Okay, if you look at Rashbam on the pasuk of ayin tachat ayin, Rashbam says, Dmei eino dichvata. Right, the payment for the money, to pay for the eye like the value of the eye. In other words, you have to pay the payment which is like the eye. Why is Rashbam doing that? It would seem not to fit his general shita. So I've been bothered that for a long time, actually. I actually discussed it this morning with Professor Lakshan after his share. And he pointed out that Rashbam never writes in Aramaic, always writing very consistently in Hebrew. And this perush, uses the word dichvata, and possibly also dmei, which is being written in Aramaic. And he suggested that this is not Rashbam. Possibly Rashbam had written something else, right? Interpreting the pasuk kipshuta. Somebody at some point was bothered by it, right? And decided to change the perush of Rashbam. Okay, a bit speculative, but I think fairly convincing. He asked me to emphasize that it's just a suggestion, and he's not sure, but to me it sounded convincing. So that's as far as ayin tachat ayin in Ibn Ezra and Rashbam. And here we'd like to start looking at a third approach, possibly a middle ground approach, which is not explicit in the Rishonim, but I'm going to try to build it up. And let's take it, the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim in source number 10. Okay, to give a little bit of a context for this Rambam, the Rambam in the third part of Moreh Nevuchim has a whole long section where he talks about Tamei HaMitzvos, reasons for mitzvahs. And first, throughout several chapters, he talks about the concept of Tamei HaMitzvos in general. And then he divides all of Taryag mitzvos into 14 categories. Right, the Rambam liked the number 14, used it in many, many contexts. Divides all the mitzvos into 14 categories and devotes a chapter of the Moreh Nevuchim to each one of the categories, where he goes through the mitzvos of that category and talks about the reasons for the mitzvahs. Okay? In that context, so first of all, in general, it's a good resource to be familiar with. Whenever you're interested in Tamei HaMitzvos, right, there are three types of sources we can look at in the Rishonim. There's the Sefer Chinuch, everybody knows. Of course, the Parshanim on the Torah is another place to look, and this Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, which, by the way, is a source for many of the reasons in the Sefer Chinuch. Sefer Chinuch was clearly working off of these chapters in the Rambam. He made changes sometimes, but often ideas that appear in Sefer Chinuch come from these chapters in the Rambam. Anyway, so the Rambam here, when he gets to our halacha, he's talking a little bit of the concept of punishment and of justice in general. The Rambam says as follows, source number 10. בדרך כלל נקבע עונשו של כל התוקף את זולתו, שיעשה לו כאשר עשה בשווה. Right, the general principle is midah keneged midah, measure for measure, whatever the person did, that's what should be done to him. אם הזיק לגוף, ינזק בגופו, ואם הזיק לממון, ינזק בממונו. מי שחיסר עבר, יחוסר עבר כמותו. כאשר ייתן מום באדם, כן יינתן בו. So the Rambam is explaining the reason for Ayin Tachat Ayin Kipshuta. So the Rambam is aware of the fact that we might be raising some eyebrows. And he says, Al ta'asik machshavtecha b'zeh she'anu onshim kan b'tashlumin. Right? Don't be worried about the fact that lahalacha, what we do in the Batei Din, is that we have people pay money rather than actually punishing them, physical punishment. כי מטרתי עכשיו לתת טעמים לכתובים, ולא לתת טעמים להלכה. My purpose here in this series of chapters talking about Tamei HaMitzvos is not to explain reasons of halacha, but to explain the reasons of the psukim, of the Torah. Now this is a fascinating statement. First of all, we can say very clearly the Rambam does not hold like the Ibn Ezra. Right? Because the Ibn Ezra says the psukim and the halacha are always the same. The Rambam does not think that they're the same. Clearly he agrees with Rashbam that we have these two different levels and that it is meaningful to talk about ta'amim for psukim. Ibn Ezra would say that doesn't mean anything. What do you mean ta'amim for psukim that are not ta'amim for halacha? It's all the same. If you think there's a difference, it's because you didn't understand what the psukim are. The Rambam is saying no. Rashbam is right that we have these two different levels. We have pshat and we have halacha, and they are both independently meaningful. And here in Moreh Nevuchim, the context, what I'm doing here is giving ta'amim for the psukim, not for the halacha. Now, had the Rambam stopped here, I would have said maybe the Rambam is exactly like Rashbam. But then there's another sentence. The Rambam says, Af shegam el halacha zot yesh li de'ah. I have some opinion, some idea about the halacha too. She'ota ashmiya ba'al peh. This is a reason which I'm happy to tell anybody verbally, ba'al peh, but I'm not going to write it here. Okay, what's going on here? Why isn't the Rambam willing to tell us? So we know the Rambam talks extensively in the Moreh Nevuchim and other places. Says there are certain ideas that it's dangerous to write down. And some things have to be kept to Ba'al Peh, based on the Mishnayos and Maseches Chagiga, and how many people you're allowed to talk to about different kinds of things. The Rambam has this concept of sodot, right, secrets. Right? Some things we have to be careful about. So clearly the Rambam has some sort of idea about the halacha of Tashlumei Nezek, which has some danger inherent in it. What's the idea and what's the danger that's inherent in it? Okay? If the idea is the very fact that the halacha could be different from the pshat, then the Rambam's already said that. Right? That ship has sailed. Right? If the Rambam is worried that we might think the halacha could be not against the pshat, he already told us that. He told us here, there's a psukim and there's the halacha, and here I'm giving the tamim for the psukim. So that's not what the Rambam is worried about. Right? So what is it that the Rambam thinks about the halacha that he's not willing to say? If it's just the reason why it makes sense, why it's fair to pay money in a case where a person gave a chavala, that I would think is very simple, right? I think any child pretty much could explain that. Why should we pay both nezek and boshet and sar and that? Because there are different aspects of hyperdim, and we want to find the person, and that way a person gets compensation. It's not very difficult to explain independently, right, why the halacha should be what the halacha is. What is difficult to explain is the relationship between the pshat and the halacha. So I think it's very clear that what the Rambam says, he has a de'ah about the halacha, he doesn't mean just about the halacha per se. He means about the relationship between the pshat and the halacha, the relationship between the ayin tachat ayin and the tashlumin. So he has something to say about that relationship, which he doesn't want to write down. This already is very different from Rashbam. Rashbam has nothing to say about the relationship between pshat and halacha other than the fact that it doesn't exist. Okay, the Rashbam very consistently ignores the question of why the halacha would be A while the pshat is B. Right? They're independently meaningful in some sense. The Rashbam, by the way, never explains what is the meaning of the pshat, why it needs to be different, why we need these levels. But in some way, evidently, they're independently meaningful. But you don't need to say anything further than that, according to Rashbam. The Rambam evidently feels that it's not enough. Yes, they are different levels. They're not all the same like Ibn Ezra. They're different. They're different but related. There's some sort of conceptual relationship between the two, which needs to be thought about, needs to be explained. But there's also some danger inherent in it. And it's not clear what that is. To strengthen this understanding of the Rambam, excuse me, Rabbi Avraham ben HaRambam, the Rambam's son, has a parish on the Torah. And here on the pasuk of Ayin Tachat Ayin, Parshas Mishpatim, he says as follows: Ayin Tachat Ayin, Pashtei Dekra Mivo'ar, the pshat of the pasuk is clear, Uve'ara HaKabbalah shekavanat HaMikra Dmei Shen Tachat Shen V'chen B'chulam. But the halacha teaches us, the Masorah teaches us that it's actually money, and both in the case of Shein Tachat Shein and Ayin Tachat Ayin and all of them. So far, exactly like the Rambam, there's two different things. I'm skipping a couple lines in Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, and then he says, "Ule'aba Mari Zal Bamoreh," my father in the Moreh Nevuchim has a remez bazeh shenimsar mimenu perusho al peh. That he has some sort of remez, which was told or could be told and not clear, be'al peh, bo hachra'a nifla'a bein hakabbalah u'pshat hamikra, v'lo efshar lekotvo mipnei shehu zal histiro. Rabbi Avraham seems to be saying, my father told me some wonderful explanation about the relationship between the Masorah and the pshat, and I can't tell you because my father, decided to hide it. Okay? So, Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam is clearly stating that the issue about which the Rambam has an explanation is not just about the halacha per se, but about this relationship between the two. Which, leaving the Rambam himself aside for the moment, we'll get back to him, but this basically raises the idea that there should be some sort of relationship, not a relationship of identity, but some other conceptual relationship between pshat and halacha. And I would like to suggest that in general, all gaps and disparities between halacha and the psukim can be ascribed to three principles. Okay, that there exists this relationship, this conceptual relationship between pshat and halacha that the Rambam is challenging us to find out. And I think they can be reduced to three principles, which I'd like to share with you now. The three principles are, in short, formalization, application, and synthesis. I'll try to explain each one of those. For the first one, formalization, I'd like to give the example that we already mentioned in the context of understanding Rashbam's opinion, the example of shomrim. Right? Remember, the pshat is that we have metaltalin versus animals. Metaltalin is a shomer is pater in Geneva v'aveda, or at least in Geneva, and as opposed to animals where the shomer is chayav in Geneva. Right? That is the pshat of the pasuk. The halacha ignores the question of whether it's metaltalin or an animal and cares only whether it is a shomer chinam or a shomer sachar. And I'd like to suggest that this halacha can be viewed as a formalization of the pshat. How? The Rishonim on the Gemara in Bava Metzia Daf Membet Amud Aleph raise the following question. We know that a shoel is chayav be'ones. Right? If something happens that was completely beyond the control of the shomer, other shomrim are pater, shomer chinam, shomer sachar is pater, only a shoel is chayav be'ones. But a shomer sachar is pater be'ones. Okay? However, in Geneva, a shomer sachar is chayav. What happens in the case of nigneva be'ones? Right? Something was stolen in such a way that the shomer could have done nothing about it. Right? Listim mizuyan. Right? Armed robbers come, not a thief who sneaks in during the night in such a way that maybe had you been there you could have prevented him. Right? But armed robbers come and steal the pikadon. This is what the Rishonim call the nigneva be'ones. On the one hand, it's gneva. On the other hand, it's be'ones. So do we say shomer sachar is chayav in gneva, so he's chayav, or do we say shomer sachar is pater in ones, and therefore he's pater? And this is machlokas Rishonim. Tosfos holds that in the case of nigneva be'ones, the shomer is, let's make sure I don't get this backwards. Tosfos holds that nigneva be'ones, the shomer is chayav. Why? He says just like a shoel is chayav be'onsin. Why is a shoel chayav be'onsin? Because part of his deal, part of his implicit deal, is that he's taking a higher level of responsibility the level of responsibility a shoel has is complete responsibility, even be'ones. A shomer sachar also has a little bit of that. He's taking some responsibility for things beyond his control, but only in those cases which can be characterized as gneva. Since this is a case of gneva, this is part of what he accepted responsibility for, and therefore he's chayiv. These are different levels of onus, and therefore nigneva be'ones is chayiv. That's exactly what we mean by the case, by the din of chiyuv gneva of a shomer sachar. That's the opinion of the Tosfos. However, the Ramban says differently. The Ramban says no. A shomer sachar does not have any kind of chiyuv onus. Onus is something which is special. Chiyuv be'onus is special for a shoel. Right? So what then is the nature of the extra chiyuv that a shomer sachar has beyond the shomer chinam? Why is the shomer sachar chayiv in geneva? The Ramban says that the definition of pshia, and what is the case where you're negligent, the case of negligence which causes a shomer to be chayav, is a function of expectations. The expectations from a shomer chinam are to lock whatever the person received in his home. The expectations from a shomer sachar, the shomer sachar, he's being paid. What's he being paid for? He's being paid to work. His job is as a shomer. Right? A person who has a job as a shomer and a professional security guard doesn't just lock things away. Anybody can do that. The professional security guard is expected to be present with the pikadon and to be guarding it. Gneva is a case where we define it as negligence if the expectations were personal presence of the guard, and we do not define it as negligence in the case where those were not the expectations. Says the Ramban, the reason that shomer sachar is chayiv b'gneva is because the higher level of expectation, the expectation of presence of the shomer. Now, if we connect this opinion of the Ramban and Bava Metzia with the Rashbam al HaTorah, we certainly find something very interesting. Rashbam al HaTorah explained the reason for the difference between metaltalin and behema exactly in the same terms. Right? The expectations. Am I expected to lock away the pikadon or to be there? It's exactly the way the Ramban doesn't explain that, by the way, in the Psukim. He goes in a completely different direction. But the Ramban's understanding of shomer chinam versus shomer sachar is conceptually the same as the Rashbam's understanding of shomer metaltalin versus shomer behema. If you put those things together, one can say that the Torah is talking in specific concrete cases, metaltalin, behema, and the halacha is understanding what the conceptual, the formal conceptual underpinning of those cases and halachas are in the Torah, and sort of redrawing or redressing those concepts in a more formalized manner. Right? The principle is that it's all a function of expectations. Torah shebichtav draws those principles in terms of concrete examples. Torah shebe'al peh defines in a very legalistic, formal fashion what are the cases in which what really defines the expectations. What really defines the expectations? It's the terms of the deal, and that is a function of shomer chinam versus shomer sachar. And in this way, the halakha can be seen as a formalization of something which is implicitly or inherently in a Torah shebichtav. The halacha is sort of like a literary expression of principles, and that's the Torah shebichtav. And the halacha, the Torah shebe'al peh, is a formal, legalistic definition of those principles. So that's principle number one, formalization. Principle number two, the second principle that defines the relationship between pshat and halacha, between Torah shebichtav and Torah shebe'al peh, is what I would call application. As an example of this, we have the pasuk that appears in Sefer Devarim. It's in Devarim Perek Yud Bet. You don't have to open, but you can if you want. Devarim Perek Yud Bet, the Torah is talking about how when you come into Eretz Yisrael, you're going to have to destroy all of the avodah zarah there. Perek Yud Bet, pasuk Gimel. V'nitatztem et mizbechotam, v'shibartem et matzevotam. You have to break their altars. V'asher hem tisafun ba'esh ufsileh lohem tegadeun. V'ibadtem et shmam min hamakom hahu. Destroy all of their temples and their altars and their idols, and completely obliterate their name from that place. And then pasuk daled, lo ta'asun ken laHashem elokechem. You shall not do that to God, to Hashem. What is it that you cannot do? So we find in the Gemara two completely different applications, two completely different explanations of what the word kain in that pasuk refers to. And both of them define independent halachos, both of which are considered deraisa, and a person can get malchus for. The first one is hanotetz even min hamizbeach, right? The mizbeach of the mikdash, the mizbeach Hashem. If a person breaks, shatters a stone from the mizbeach, he is chayiv malchus because he was over and lo tasun kain l'Hashem Elokechem. What is the kain according to that? It's v'nitetztem et mizbechotam. You should shatter their altars, but do not do that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But also we have the isser of michikat Hashem, erasing God's name. If God's name is written on a cloth or on a paper or in a Sefer Torah or whatever, and you come and erase it, you are over on the isser of lo tasun kain l'Hashem Elokechem, and once again it's a deraisa for which you could receive malchus. What is the kain according to that? The kain according to that is not v'nitetztem et mizbechotam, but v'ibadtem et shmam min hamakom haho. Right? To erase or to obliterate their name from that place, but you should not do that to God. You cannot erase His name. Right? And the question is, which does the pasuk mean? How can the word kain refer to two different things? Without going into too much detail, I think what is clearly happening here is that the halacha is once again taking a principle, taking the essential kiyum, what we call the essential value, the essential statement from the pasuk, and applying it beyond its borders. What is the pasuk saying? The pasuk is saying is that you cannot erase or obliterate God's presence in the world. There are various expressions of God's presence in the world. One of them is His written name. Another one is His mizbeach. And the destruction of those expressions of God's will and glory in the world may not be destroyed. That's lo tasun kain l'Hashem Elokechem. In terms of pshat of the pasuk, the sentence can only mean one of the two. But the halacha is taking the concept and applying it beyond its borders, expanding it. The common denominator of both these principles that we just talked about, the formalization and the application, is that in both of them, right, the halacha is taking the same fundamental kiyum, the same fundamental value, essential value, and applying it, formalizing it, and so on. Right? The halacha appearing as the legal system, and the Torah Shebechtav as the literary statements and exhortations for an establishment of essential principles. The third principle that governs these differences between Torah Shebechtav and Torah Shebe'al Peh is synthesis of a contradiction. And here I'm building on work that was done by Mori Rabbi of Mordechai Breuer, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Famous example that Rav Breuer brought was the case of Eved Ivri. Okay, the Torah says, both in Parshas Mishpatim and in Parshas Re'eh, that if you have an Eved Ivri, after 6 years of his work, when the 7th year comes along, Lachofshi Toshalachenu Meimach, right, you must release him when the 7th year comes. And if the slave then says, either he says in Parshas Mishpatim, he says, I love my family, or in Parshas Re'eh, he says, I love being with you, my master. But in any case, if the slave is happy and he wants to remain where he is, we do what's called ritzi'ah, right? V'ikriv Adonai et ozno el hadelet o el hamezuzah, v'ratza et ozno b'martzea. And after doing ritzi'ah, va'avado le'olam. The slave should continue working for the master le'olam, meaning forever, forever. Okay? However, the halacha is not so. The slave does not get to work le'olam, even if he wants to. When the yovel comes along, the slave must leave the position and the work by the master. This is based on Psukim Parshas Behar that talk about the fact that avadim are released in the yovel. But the Psukim Parshas Behar are not talking specifically about the case of an Eved who underwent Ritziah, who already said that he wanted to stay. And the Psukim Parshas Mishpatim and in Re'eh seem to say clearly that after Ritziah, va'avado le'olam. So how does the halacha say that when the yovel comes along, after Ritziah, the Eved goes free? So the halacha says, le'olam olamo shel yovel. The word olam here means not le'olam in the usual sense of forever, but in some sort of long period characterized by the yovel, that is the le'olam, which is obviously very difficult, especially when you consider the possibility that the yovel might be only a year or two after this time of Ritziah. So Rashbam in fact says, va'avado le'olam, I don't remember the exact words, he says le'olam, keep shivta forever. Right? And that's the pshat, and the halacha is different, and that's okay. So Rav Breuer came along and said, yes, clearly Rashbam is right, that le'olam, in terms of the meaning of the word, means forever. And the pshat of the pasuk of Avodah, le'olam, is that he should work forever. But we're not going to leave it like Rashbam at that and say, okay, and the halacha and the pshat, and those are two different things, and that's it. Rav Breuer said we need to understand the relationship between the two parshias. The parsha in Behar is in fact a contradiction to the parsha in Mishpatim and in Re'eh. Okay? The parsha in Behar, which says that a Eved leaves at the Yovel, and implies that that happens no matter what, without specifying any differences. And by the way, not mentioning the idea of an Eved leaving after the 6th year, that is one bechina, one aspect, as Rav Breuer calls it. That's one parsha which has its own principle. And the parsha in Mishpatim, which says that an Eved leaves after 6 years, does not mention Yovel, but does give the option of Ritziah, after which the Eved works forever. That is a completely different parsha which stands on its own. And these two parshas are, excuse me, are contradictory in a very real sense. And Rav Breuer explained that each one of these parshas is an expression of a different principle. The parsha in Mishpatim is talking about the principle, and here I'm going to say it, actually phrase it a little bit differently than Rav Breuer himself. Parsha in Mishpatim is about the Ben Adam Lachavero, the relationship that the Eved should have, that the Adam, that the master should have towards the Eved, how to treat an Eved. What is the right way to treat an Eved to enable him to leave after 6 years? Right? If he wants to stay, then the right thing, the right way to treat him is to in fact allow him to stay forever. Parshas Behar is a completely different principle. The pasuk says, "Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim." It's all about Malchut Hashem, about how people are not owned by other people or even by themselves. They all belong to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the principle of Yovel. And therefore, in that context, the Torah does not mention Ritziah. It's not about Ritziah. It's not about the relationship between the people. It's a Ben Adam L'Makom. What is the function of halacha? So the Torah says the function of halacha is not to interpret the psukim. It is to synthesize that contradiction. It is to give some sort of middle ground, to apply and to formalize some sort of legal definition which will have a partial expression of each of the two poles of this contradiction. Neither one of the parshas is going to be fulfilled in its complete sense. Right? The principle of V'avadah le'olam is not going to be fulfilled in its complete sense because by Yovel he's going to be outside. Right? But each one is sort of partial, and the halacha gives us this middle ground. And that is the principle of a synthesis of a contradiction, which I think can be used for the case of Ein Tachat Ein as well. And that's where we'll come back full circle and complete this share with. To understand how we can explain Ein Tachat Ein as a synthesis of a contradiction, let's go back to the Moreh Nevuchim for a minute. Now, unfortunately, when I was preparing the source sheet, I omitted one sentence from the quote of the Moreh Nevuchim, but I'll read it to you. Right after exactly the direct continuation of the quote in source number 10, there's one more sentence that's not on your sheets, where it says as follows. Al haptzaim she'i efshar kmotam mamash nifsakim tashlumin. The Rambam is making a distinction between two cases. If you notice in the part of Moreh Nevuchim which you do have on the sheets, when the Rambam talks about the pasuk of Kasher Yiten Mum Ba'adam, the Rambam said, Misha chiser ever, yichusar ever kmoto. When you have permanent lasting damage, then the punishment is Kasher Yiten Mum Ba'adam Ken Yinaten Bo. And in this additional sentence, which I just read to you, the Rambam says in other cases, Al haptzaim, when it is a petza, where there is no lasting damage, she'i efshar kmotam mamash, where you can't do exactly like them because you don't know exactly how it's going to heal. Nifsakim tashlumim, there we paskin payment. Where does the Rambam get that idea from? So the Rambam is clearly basing himself on psukim that appear only a couple of psukim before Ein Tachat Ein. Let's go back to Sefer Shemot. Let's open up in the Tanakh. It's in Shemot Perek Kaf Aleph, Pasuk Yud Chet. Kaf Aleph Yud Chet. Shemot Kaf Aleph Yud Chet. V'chi rivun anashim, v'hika ish et re'eu be'evan uv'egov. Two people are fighting and one strikes the other. V'lo yamut v'nafal lemishkav, and the victim does not immediately die, but he is bedridden. Im yakum v'italech b'chutz al mishanto. If eventually he manages to get up, he doesn't die from his wounds, but he is healed. V'nika hamakeh. Right, then the the attacker goes free. He's not punished by death. He should only pay the losses that the victim suffered, both for medical bills and for shevet, meaning the fact that he couldn't work during that time. Right? The attacker must pay his losses. The pasuk here is clearly saying, "V'nikah hamakeh rak shivto yiten v'rapo yirapeh." The attacker suffers nothing except the payment. What about the principle of ayin tachat ayin? So the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim is making a distinction between the two cases. If it's an ayin or a shein, right, then we do ayin tachat ayin. Then it's kasher yiten mum b'adam ken yinaten bo. Means that's misha chiser ever. But if it is a petza, which is something which can't be done exactly, there we do tashlumin. The Rambam is sort of like trying to resolve an apparent contradiction between the psukim. But wait a minute. Does that really work? Doesn't work, right? Go back to the pasuk that we started the share with. Pasuk chaf hey. Kviya tachat kviya. Petza tachat patza. Chabura tachat chabura. The pasuk is clearly applying the principle of midah keneged midah, of ayin tachat ayin, not only to chisur evarim, but also to cases of petza. So what's the Rambam doing here? Second. So I think the Rambam understood that there was a real contradiction between the psukim. A contradiction between the pasuk that establishes shevet and ripui on the one hand, and the pasuk that establishes ayin tachat ayin on the other hand. Right? These are not, al pi pshat, the Rambam understood that these are not really halachas for different cases. Al pi pshat, these are two psukim establishing different principles, contradictory principles. Because it's very clear that you can't do both. Right, to say, okay, somebody took out somebody else's eye, we will both take out his eye, and he will pay shevet and ripui. So then the person is being punished more than what he inflicted on the first person. Now, there are some cases where the Torah says that the punishment for doing something is more than what you did. Classic case is Gneva, where you're chayav kefel. But as long as the Torah has not established that, right, the principle of midah keneged midah, which is expressed so clearly in ayin tachat ayin, is establishing a principle of justice, which was that we cannot punish the person more than what he did. So to do ayin tachat ayin and shevet and ripui is clearly unjust. That's not an option. And therefore there's a contradiction between shevet and ripui on the one hand, and ayin tachat ayin on the other hand. And the principles with which each of these psukim are expressing are different principles. The principle being expressed by ayin tachat ayin is the principle of punishment. This person did something that is deserving of punishment, and the just punishment is ayin tachat ayin. And that's what the Rambam says in Moreh Nevuchim. That is the principle of midah keneged midah, which the Torah uses in general in its punishments. What's the problem with that solution, the solution of ayin tachat ayin? The problem is that the nizak, right, the nechbal, the victim, doesn't receive anything. There's no compensation for the victim. Okay? On the other hand, we have the pasuk of shevet v'ripui saying, forget about punishments for a minute. We have this poor guy here who's been hurt and who's been bedridden for so long. He needs to be compensated. So we have a conflict between the principle of punishment, of just punishment, and the principle of compensation. What do we do with this contradiction between principles? So what Torah Shebichtav expresses each one of those principles in its extreme. One pasuk says, "Kasher yaseh, kasher ish kiten mum b'mito, kasher yaseh ken yaseh lo." That is the principle of just punishment. And there's another pasuk that establishes in its extreme and in its pure form the principle of compensation. V'nikah hamakeh rak shivto yiten v'rapo yirapeh. Torah shebe'al peh needs to give a synthesis of this contradiction. Right? L'halacha, we can't just say live in two completely different principles. Principles are nice, but we need to paskin something in the basin. So what are we going to do? So Torah shebe'al peh says, listen, the corporal punishment is going to completely eliminate the compensation. That's not a synthesis. That's not a compromise. That's going to one extreme. Okay? However, we can, by means of compensation, perform some sort of compromise. Right? Because The fact is that once the person, the attacker, has to pay money, that's also some form of punishment. It's not the ideal punishment, right? It's not the extreme punishment. It's not the punishment he deserves, but there is some aspect of punishment. We'll have a partial punishment and a complete compensation, rather than a complete punishment and no compensation. So the Rambam, I think, understood. He doesn't say it beferish, so it's a little bit speculative. The Rambam, I think, understood that that is the function of halacha. Halacha here is synthesizing this contradiction between the psukim. But the Rambam doesn't want to explain this idea, because talking about principles governing the relationship between Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, and saying that it's formalization and application and synthesis and so on, and explaining these ideas, could sound like it means that Chazal are doing it on their own, that they're making it up. And the Rambam wants to steer very clear from that idea. As the Rambam talks about in the Hakdama to the Mishnah and in Mishnah Torah and all over, it's very, very important that people believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. So yes, Torah Sheba'al Peh is not completely disconnected from Torah Shebechtav. We have these principles. But if I tell you these principles, says the Rambam, you might start thinking that these are principles by which Chachamim make the things up on their own. So I'd rather not tell you. And that's why in Moreh Nevuchim he does not mention this relationship with the contradiction, but he hints at it by talking about the different psukim and hinting into the pasuk of Shevet V'Ripui in the same breath as he's talking about his explanation for the halacha. He says, I have an explanation for halacha which I can tell you about Peh, and in some cases we do Shevet V'Ripui. He's having you put those things together. In Mishnah Torah as well, I think there is a remez for this. Take a look at source number 12. Sorry, number 11. We're not going to get to number 12. Source number 11, and with this we'll end, is the Rambam in Hilchos Chaver L'Mazik Perek Aleph, right at the beginning of Hilchos Chaver L'Mazik. In the first two halachas, the Rambam starts out by saying what the din is, exactly based on the Mishnah Bava Kama, Chovel B'Chavaro, Chayav B'Chamisha Dvarim, Nezek, Ripui, Shevet, etc. He says it's Mipi HaShmua, in other words, it's a Masoret from Moshe Sinai. Then the Rambam says in Halacha Gimel, Zeh shenemar b'Torah ka'asher yiten mum ba'adam ken yinaten bo, eino lachbol b'zeh k'mo shechaval b'chavero, ela shu ra'oi lechasro eder o lachbol b'k'mo she'asa, ulefichach משלם נזקו. והרי הוא אומר, ולא תיקחו כופר לנפש רוצח, לרוצח בלבד הוא שאין כופר, אבל לחסרון איברים או לחבלות יש כופר. So first of all, the Rambam says, the halachic application of the pasuk of כאשר ייתן מום באדם כן יינתן בו is tashlumin, and what's the source for that? The Rambam quotes the Gemara that we saw in Bava Kama. Out of the 10 or so limudim in the Gemara, the Rambam chose this one, of lo tichul kofir lenefesh rotzach, and the Rambam quotes that. Now, notice that that is a limud which does not apply directly to the pasuk. This is not a limud which says something about the words of the pasuk of kasher yiten mum b'adam ken yinatin bo. It is a limud which tells us that it must be that the halacha is tashlumin, and that's where we get because it says kofir. Continues the Rambam in Halacha Daled, V'chen zeh shenemar b'chovel b'chavero maziko lo tachos einecha. That appears in the pasuk of the katzota et kapa, which is where we learn boshets from, but a pipshat is cutting off a hand. Also there says the Rambam, shelo tachos b'tashlumin. Shema tomar ani hu zeh v'lo shelo b'chavana chaval bo rachamenu lechach neimar lo tachos einecha. How do we know that it means tashlumim? Here the Rambam doesn't say how we know. It seems as though he's relying on what he said in the previous halacha, that from the pasuk of Lo tikhu kofir lenefesh rotzach, we learn that for Roshei Avarim, you do take kofir, so it's all tashlumin, and that applies to this pasuk as well. Then the Rambam says something very odd. In Halacha Hey, Uminayin shezeh shenoah be'avarim ayin tachat ayin tashlumin hom. Stop there. What do you mean minayin? You just explained to me. It's from Lo tikhu kofir lenefesh rotzach. It seems as though the Rambam has two different limudim. Why does he need to? So yes, he's talking about a different pasuk here. The pasuk ayin tachat ayin, which is in Mishpatim, and there he was talking about Emor. But the limud that he already brought could equally as well apply to this. So I think the Rambam is saying the second limud because he wants to hint something to us. What does he say in Halacha? Hey, shenemar chabura tachat chabura. Right, not the beginning of the pasuk ayin tachat ayin, but the end of the pasuk chabura tachat chabura. ובפירוש נאמר וכי כאיש את רעהו באבן או בגוף וגומר רק שבטו ייתן ורפו ירפא. הלמדת שתחת שנאמר בחבורה תשלומין. Right, since chabura, there are no Roshei Evarim, so there's no Chiyuv Nezek, there's no possibility of Ayin Tachat Ayin per se. You go to the pasuk of Shivto Yitin V'Rapo Yirapeh. You see there it's Tashlumin. So you see that the Tachat of Chabura, Tachat Chabura, must be Tashlumin. Besides the fact of why the Rambam needs to say this, it also doesn't really make sense. Right? You could easily have the Ayin Tachat Ayin and also the Shevet and the Ripui. It only makes sense if you assume that the Rama is working off this assumption that there's a conceptual contradiction, not just the word tachat gzera shava. There's a conceptual contradiction between the Shevet and Ripui on the one hand, that pasuk, and on the other hand, the pasuk of chavura tachat chavura. And the halacha, as we said before, is a resolution of the contradiction, not an interpretation, but a synthesis of this contradiction as one of the three principles that we mentioned before, the application, formalization, and synthesis, which are the principles that govern the relationship between the halacha and the Torah shebichtav.